It wasn't a headline, it wasn't a scandal, it was a seating chart. And in the architecture of royal politics, a name left off that list can speak louder than 1,000 press releases. Prince Harry arrived alone. Press suit, measured step, cameras clicking like rain, but no Meghan. Not this time, not on the soil. The occasion, a closed-door royal summit, one of those tightly scheduled, emotionally loaded family engagements that the palace never labels crisis, but always choreographs, with the weight of dynastic gravity. Charles was present, William too, even Camilla made an appearance. But Meghan nowhere near London, nowhere in the frame, no official statement, no dramatic backstory, just omission. And that omission was deafening. In a world obsessed with optics, it wasn't what Harry said when he stepped out of that black car. It was what or who he wasn't accompanied by. This wasn't the Sussexes. This was a solo royal walking into a kingdom that had already reformatted itself without his wife. Tabloids speculated everything from deliberate snub to strategic soft landing for future reconciliation. Insiders whispered of Meghan declining the invite. Others insisted no invite came at all. The truth, it may not matter, because perception is power. And the perception was clear. She was not welcome. What made it louder was the silence. No post from Archwell. No smiling family shot on Instagram. No leaked PR statement about staying back with the kids. Nothing. Meghan had built a media strategy around transparency, curated vulnerability, and a certain brand of soft defiance. But this time she gave nothing. And sometimes nothing is the hardest narrative to spin. Harry, to his credit, smiled politely. He walked in like protocol required. But body language experts dissected the way his hand fidgeted, the way his eyes darted, the way he said, "I'm glad to be here," without once using the word we. There was no second pair of heels on the red carpet, no hand-in-hand defiance, no shared glance that once made headlines. Just a man alone returning to the place he once left with thunder. And so the cameras rolled, the headlines read between the lines, and the public began to ask, is Harry still Sussex or slowly becoming Windsor again? Because absence isn't just a logistical note, it's a message. And this message was delivered with exquisite royal precision. Meghan Markle was not invited, and the world noticed. Nothing in the royal family is accidental, not the brooches, not the procession order, and certainly not who stands next to whom. So when Prince Harry arrived alone for his closed-door meeting with King Charles, no Meghan, no statement, no preemptive PR spin, what we witnessed wasn't awkward logistics. It was orchestration. Silence as a message, absence as choreography. This was the kind of royal event the palace doesn't promote, but always prepares for. A carefully managed summit with symbolic weight. Not quite a reconciliation, but not a rejection either. Something in between. And Meghan, she wasn't part of the visual grammar. The optics were surgical. Harry was placed third in the motorcade. He entered 5 minutes after William. He was seen talking to aides, never directly to his brother. He was offered just enough royal protocol to feel included, but just little enough to remind everyone he was different. And standing beside him, no one. The visual message didn't scream. It whispered, "We are letting you back in, but only you." And the media understood the language. Sky News called it a signal of thaw, but not reunion. The Times noted a notable absence that reframes the Sussex narrative. Even the BBC, normally neutral, pointed out the striking visual symmetry of a family divided but not broken. Meanwhile, the palace released no official photo, but they didn't have to, because every shot that emerged told the same story. One prince, no duchess. And every publication from Hello to the Telegraph ran a variation of the same headline. Harry returned solo, Meghan remained silent. Was it a snub and negotiation tactic or a test? No one knows. And that's the point. Ambiguity keeps the press guessing. But for those fluent in royal symbolism, the scene was crystal clear. Meghan is no longer part of the palace equation. She wasn't exiled, she was excluded. Not with words, but with angles, with lighting, with who walked next to whom. That's the genius of royal optics. It doesn't defame, it deletes. And so Meghan, once central to the royal chaos, has been written out of the current frame, not with scandal, but with stillness. And in her absence, the palace has found its most elegant rebuttal. No need to attack what you can simply uninclude. This isn't just cold, it's crafted. And that in the world of the Windsors is far more permanent than fury ever was. She wasn't there, not on the plane, not on the palace steps, not in any photo. And yet she was everywhere. Every frame of Prince Harry walking alone became a frame about Meghan. Every headline that said Harry reunites with Charles carried a subtitle, Meghan not invited. She didn't need to speak, because the silence surrounding her absence was already speaking volumes. The British press did what they do best, they turned her absence into presence. Where is Meghan, asked the Express. Has Meghan been sidelined for good? Speculated the Sun. An invitation that never came, whispered the Mail. Even the Guardian, usually reserved, noted, in a family so obsessed with protocol, her omission is a decision. Social media followed suit. At Where is Meghan trended for 12 hours. Users drew red circles around empty spots beside Harry. Some joked about a green screen. Others turned it into satire. Meghan is so powerful she's stealing the show by not being in it. That's the paradox of narrative control. The more Meghan tries to pull away, the more the media pulls her back in. She becomes the ghost at the feast, not welcome but impossible to ignore. Even her silence became suspect. No post from Archewell. No statement. Not even a sending love placeholder. And in a PR era where silence usually means lawyers, this silence felt curated, or worse, calculated. Because in the past, Meghan always had the last word. A podcast, a press release, a Netflix series. This time she gave them nothing, and that nothing became everything. Public reaction split fast. Camp A, she's been iced out, let her go. Camp B, they're still controlling the narrative. She's the scapegoat again. Camp C. This is the first time the royal family finally made a move without her shadow. But whichever camp you stood in, the result was clear. The story still revolved around Meghan, even when she didn't want it to. And that, ironically, may be her biggest loss yet. Not being criticized, not being canceled, but being reabsorbed into a narrative she no longer owns. Because when the camera finds the space beside a prince and asks, why is it empty? The answer always becomes about the woman who was supposed to be there. And this time she wasn't. He walked alone. Not because he had to, but because perhaps he wanted to see what it felt like. To stand once more in the heart of the machine he once fled. To return not as rebel nor runaway, but as man. Not they, just him. For years, Harry and Meghan were a unit. Every step he took, she narrated. Every absence he suffered, she framed. They were a branded duo, a single hyphenated headline. But this meeting, this return, it was all Harry, and that felt deliberate. Observers noted his body language, shoulders back, steps slower, less guarded. There was no show of defiance, but also no trace of shame. He wasn't asking to be let back in. He was letting the palace see who he'd become outside of their walls. Was this reconciliation, maybe? Was it distance from Meghan? Not yet. But it was a test, a trial of his own identity. Because something about walking alone in a world that once demanded he belong in pairs felt quietly radical. This was a man stepping out of shadow, even if that shadow had protected him. Insiders suggest Harry has been reaching out to aides not to return full-time, but to renegotiate what belonging might mean without giving up what he's built with Meghan. But even a negotiation position matters, and showing up without her says more than any clause in any agreement. The palace, for its part, didn't embrace, but they didn't resist either. They let him walk, let him sit, let him be seen. They did not ask about her, and he did not offer. This is what strategic silence looks like, not conflict, not abandonment, just space. Space Harry may be claiming as his own. Some royal analysts say he's positioning for future roles. Others believe he's carving a separate path, adjacent to the firm but not dependent on it. Either way, he is repositioning, and for the first time, he's doing it without Meghan by his side. That's not betrayal, that's boundary. And in royal politics, boundary is everything. Perhaps he's not burning bridges, but he's definitely planting markers. He's saying, this is me without the glare. This is where I stand if you're willing to see it. And maybe this is what I look like without her shaping the frame. It's not yet exile, but it isn't loyalty either. It's strategy, softly drawn, deliberately paced. The quiet redrawing of a man's own map. She wasn't on the list, she wasn't on the carpet. She wasn't even in the speculation of who might show up. Because this time there was no pretending. Meghan Markle wasn't part of the room, wasn't part of the story, but she was still the question every headline danced around. Not why she wasn't invited, but what it means when even the palace doesn't feel the need to offer an excuse. This wasn't exile, it wasn't scandal. It was a mission. Cool, deliberate, muted. And that in royal language is often the end of a chapter. Not with fire, but with frost. Harry didn't mention her, Charles didn't ask. The media focused more on body language than on marriage dynamics. Because when one side has already edited you out, you don't even need to be rebutted. You're just gone from the frame. But this isn't just about Meghan. It's about Harry and us. Because when a man who once left a crown for love walks back into the institution alone, we have to ask, was the story ever as united as it seemed? Or are we just now seeing its separate threads unravel publicly? Perhaps this was a one-off, a formality, a brief thaw. Or perhaps this is the start of a slow repositioning where Harry becomes Harry Windsor again, and Meghan becomes an echo from a different chapter. And if that's true, then this isn't just a royal meeting. It's a pivot, a soft power play wrapped in silence, a new phase where appearances no longer need explanation, just absence. So now the lines are drawn, even if no one says it, and the audience, as always, gets to choose their lens. Team Harry for walking in without armor. Team Meghan for being quietly sidelined yet still targeted. Team Not Fooled for seeing a palace PR move for what it is. Because in the monarchy, no statement is still a statement. And when the Duchess isn't invited, it's not just about her. It's about the story the palace once told from now on.